Chapter 562. His eyes narrowed, and the light from his eyes was extremely sharp. The feeling of déjà vu is not a lie. His eyes finally fell on the young man in the black coat, and glanced at the pigeon on his shoulder. Dustless's eyes flashed. It turns out to be them. No wonder I felt they were familiar. Wu Chen's face revealed an untraceable arc. He already knew the origin and identity of these people. The secret spy agency of the world government. CP9. However, this group of people was much younger than they were in the future. Dustless didn't recognize them at first glance. Seeing Lucci's strange dress and the pigeon on his shoulder, he suddenly recognized them. Frowning slightly, Dustless didn't remember interacting with these people. While Dustless was looking at the CP9, these young CP9 members also quietly peeked at Dustless, and then looked at the celestial dragons foaming at the mouth, and their faces were moved. They had long heard that Dustless was a different kind of celestial dragons, and today they saw it with their own eyes. Louis South, Saint, let us deal with these celestial dragons. As the leader of the team, Lucci bowed slightly, and then said in a respectful tone. Dustless was silent when he heard the words, and his deep eyes turned around several people, as if he was planning something, and his eyes flashed with a strange luster. Seeing Dustless was silent, Lucci gave Kaku a look. The latter nodded slightly, and then walked toward the celestial dragons lying on the ground, and the disgust in his eyes disappeared. No matter who in the world, they don't have a good impression of celestial dragons, even if they are members of the government. When Kaku was about to drag this group of celestial dragons away, a black shadow suddenly attacked. The speed was as fast as lightning, and the naked eye could only see a fleeting afterimage. Kaku did not hesitate to block with his arms in front of him, and his whole body tensed, and his flesh turned into an invisible armor, extremely hard, resisting the incoming shadow. Bang! The powerful force was beyond imagination, and Kaku was instantly sent flying backward. He retreated a distance of 3 feet before he could stop. His face was pale, and his arms were trembling uncontrollably. Who the hell are you? Staring at Hancock, Kaku suppressed the anger in his heart and asked with an ugly face. The strength of this young woman dressed as a maid was unexpectedly strong. The young master didn't agree to your conditions. Naturally, you can't take this person away. A cold voice came from Hancock's mouth. Hancock said expressionlessly. These CP9 are obviously trying to fish in troubled waters. Dustless remained silent from beginning to end. He neither agreed nor denied. Hancock, who had been with Dustless all the time, knew that Dustless was actually rejecting them. If you dare to attack again, it won't be so simple. Staring at Kaku, Hancock's silky eyes were replaced by coldness, and the warning and contempt in her tone were obvious. The strength of these CP9 is not enough. Rob, Lucci and others' faces were gloomy, and their brows were wrinkled, and their fists were uncontrollably clenched. They have already lowered their posture, but they didn't expect Dustless to be so inhumane. Not only did he not give them any face, but he also took the opportunity to slap them in the face. Looking at Dustless's slightly smiling eyes, all the members of the CP9 loosened their fists at the same time. Putting aside the gap between their identities, Dustless's bottomless strength made them unable to compete with him. All of them together, even the little maid named Hancock may not be able to defeat him. And the felony of attacking a celestial dragon is enough for them to go to jail for a lifetime. You know what's good for you. Hancock glanced at the CP9 members, and then she stood back to Dustless. Dustless looked at them with interest, and he nodded secretly. These people are young, but their strength is really good. Perhaps they are not at the peak state like they will be in the future, but they are not far from it. You are the guests of the government, and this trivial matter will be handled by Hancock. His eyes swept over the CP9 members. Dustless smiled, and his eyes finally fell on Lucci, pointing to the fainted Tenryubito below. If you urgently need to recover them, just go out and wait. In the end, Wu Chen recovered his usual calm expression. His expression was full of indifference, and his cold tone didn't leave any room for retreat. Then, he closed his eyes and completely ignored these people. The CP9 members suddenly stiffened, and their eyes were faintly burning. Recover! What do you think we are doing? We are the secret spies of the world government, not the waste recovery manager of the garbage station. The corners of their mouths twitched violently, and the CP9 members almost vomited blood. Dustless's eyes were like looking at a mouse, which made them speechless and tangled. Their lungs were burning with fire, but they couldn't vent it. The fire went straight to the brain along the meridians of the body, burning their reason. In the past, when they performed tasks, almost all of them went smoothly, and they crushed the other side with absolute strength, but this task was unexpected. In terms of strength, they can't even beat the other side's maid, and in terms of background, they are even worse. The essence of the existence of the world government is to work for the celestial dragon. Especially Wu Chen's teasing and mocking gaze, it made them feel a few hundred times worse than eating 5 kilograms of flies. They could only lower their heads and not dare to meet Wu Chen's gaze, fearing that they would be violently beaten up by the other party if they were impulsive. In that case, goodbye. Chapter 563. The CP9 group quietly retreated, and the expression of wanting to attack but not daring to break out made Hancock laugh again and again. The World Government Spy Agency directly under Dustless was like a clown in front of him, and they couldn't raise their heads at all. They had no dignity and could only escape. Seeing that the CP9 group completely disappeared, Hancock ran out to find bodyguards to drag the group of Tenryubito out. Although the bodyguards were full of fear, throwing Tenryubito into the garbage dump was not a small crime. Because of Dustless's terrifying power, they still chose to do it. At least the Tenryubito will find trouble in the future. Disobeying Dustless now may result in blood splashing on the spot. In the dark, Dustless's face gradually converged and turned into monotonous ridicule. His deep black eyes were full of wisdom, and he had already guessed why the CP9 suddenly visited. Master, there is something wrong with them. Hancock stood beside Dustless and wondered. She always felt that these people had other plans, but she couldn't tell the specifics. It was not reasonable for them to go back empty-handed. And their hands are too long. CP9 is only an official of the world government, and the object of their specific service seems to be only CP0. Hancock was puzzled. Dustless had told her these things before. Dustless just smiled mysteriously when he heard the words, and his knuckles rhythmically tapped on the table. He was slightly surprised and then nodded gently. He didn't expect Hancock to see the trick. Perhaps because Hancock can be an outsider, she can observe the overall development from an observer's point of view, and then get alternative indirect information. It's very simple, because they want to get valuable things from me, but the CP9 is too arrogant. Even their behind-the-scenes boss can't do it, let alone these small people. Shaking his head contemptuously, Dustless sneered. Ha! The smile on his face suddenly froze. Dustless raised his head and stared at the dark corridor. He suddenly felt a pair of eyes peeking at them from there. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing there. The gloomy space maintained a deathly stillness from beginning to end. There was no change at all. It was as quiet as stagnant water. Was it an illusion? Dustless wondered. His perception rarely made mistakes, and his accuracy had even reached the level of 100%. Damn stupid cow. Do you think you can close the gap between us with the devil fruit? Naive and ignorant. Wu Chen sneered inwardly with a sneer on his face. He suddenly remembered a member of the CP9 named Blueno. He is a paramecia door fruit user. His ability is that any object he touches will turn into a door and can be opened. He can open the door through air and then achieve incredible space jumping ability. In short, it could barely be considered a heaven-defying ability. You want to use the ability of the devil fruit to close the gap in strength and use it to spy on intelligence. It's a good idea, but you chose the wrong target. Dustless smiled and was about to kill Blueno on the spot. His eyes flashed, and the majestic chakra gathered in his body instantly disappeared. Such a good chess piece can be used in the opposite way. Dustless, Sama, what is their purpose? Seeing Dustless's strange silence, Hancock asked puzzledly. She can conclude that the purpose of the CP9 is not simple, and there is an unknown conspiracy. That's for sure. Hearing this, Dustless rubbed his throat and deliberately raised his voice, saying, the purpose of this group of people is very simple. It's estimated that they are here to spy on the design of Pluton. A few idiots want to take the design from me. Is that so? Hancock's nose wrinkled slightly, and her clear eyes looked at Dustless suspiciously. In the blink of an eye, Dustless gave her a kind of earth-shaking change, as if he was a different person. Of course, there is more than one design of Pluton in this world. The original Pluton was designed and built by Water 7, so they should have a backup design in their hands. Wu Chen explained with certainty. His resolute tone was convincing. The original founders of Pluto were the craftsmen of Water 7, so it was understandable that such a confidential design was left behind. But that's the case. Hancock's eyes flashed as if she just woke up from a dream. Since Water 7 was the base for the creation of Pluton, it's reasonable to leave behind the design of Pluton. Dustless chatted casually for a while, and the words fell into Blueno's hands word for word. What kind of joke is this? That's the design of Pluto. How could it be so easy to get the source of the information? I heard from the other 5 that Louis South's strength has already reached the peak of perfection. If it's so easy to get the information, what's the difference between him and those newbies? In the dark promenade, CP9 member Kaku was the first to question loudly. Perhaps there is indeed information about Pluton in Water 7, but it's ridiculous that it's so easy to spy on the source of the information. Although Blueno's fruit ability is really amazing, it can't dispel his doubts. A group of CP9 members were hesitant. Although Blueno used this ability to spy on a lot of confidential information, this time his opponent was Dustless, who was feared by the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars. They always felt that it was too childish. Why is it impossible? That man sneered at us before and didn't look at us seriously. People make mistakes and horses stumble. It's normal for me to spy on him when he's full of success. Blueno's face turned red as he saw his teammates looking at him suspiciously. Let's report to the 5 elders. Lucci, who has been silent from the beginning, said conservatively. He always felt that this is a trap. Even if he knows it's a trap, he must go in. Chapter 564. Early the next morning, the morning wind was mighty and there were no clouds in the sky. Princess Otoheim was ordered by Dustless to return to the Fishman Island early. This was also the result of her pleading. Of course, it was also her last trip to the Fishman Island. In addition, she also had a special task given to her by Dustless. The Fishman Island had long been regarded as a forbidden place by Wuxian. Whitebeard had unscrupulously occupied the island. How could Wuxian just watch the duck that was about to reach his mouth disappear without a trace? Especially that old guy had a close relationship with the former pirate king, Jold Roger. There was a great possibility that he would get the news of the ancient weapon Poseidon from Roger. Whitebeard's ambition has to be guarded against. Although the Surface and Akagami, Red Hair, are righteous people, it is undeniable that he is a big pirate king as cunning as a rabbit. Roger and Shiki of the 3 legendary pirates have already fallen, and now only Whitebeard is performing. Dustless, Sama, Whitebeard's fleet only has a small number of personnel stationed on the Fishman Island, which does not constitute a substantial threat. The people of the Whitebeard pirates are also quite educated. At least they didn't do such things as robbing. White Zetsu explained, and his words showed admiration for Whitebeard. He is afraid that only the Whitebeard pirates can restrain the inferior pirates to such an obedient level. Hearing that Whitebeard is not on the Fishman Island, Dustless's heart relaxed. At least he doesn't have the idea of the ancient weapon, Poseidon. What about the traces of the CP9 brats yesterday? They should have gone to report to Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars. Wearing pajamas, sitting leisurely on the sofa, Dustless asked calmly. Brats? Hearing this, White Zetsu was stunned at first, and then understood that Dustless was talking about the CP9. He said, they didn't. They seemed to have gathered to discuss it yesterday, but they didn't say anything after discussing it all night. It is estimated that they went to Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, or Commander Kong to make a choice. White Zetsu said truthfully, although he didn't know why he cared about a few minions, he still collected information seriously. This kind of thing is beyond the scope of what the CP9 can do. It can only be solved by finding a higher-level person. Commander Kong and Gorosei are the best candidates. That doesn't matter. It's the same no matter who knows about the 5 honored stars or Commander Kong. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, the results of their actions should be the same. Dustless smiled calmly. He had already guessed the decision of the 5 honored stars. On the avenue of Mariehua, all the members of the CP9 looked very unnatural. It's not that they suspected Blueno. They trained together when they were children and they were already honest with each other. They would never be bored enough to suspect that he was a traitor. Even if Bruno's explanation was reasonable, in their eyes, it was extremely far-fetched. Even if some people were really careless, what they said casually was not something they could pry into. Since you doubt me, let the 5 great elders decide. Bruno was too lazy to waste his breath and simply kicked the ball to the 5 great elders. Lucci saw all this, and his heart burned with a blazing flame. He was particularly irritated. He always felt that this was a trap, and even if he knew, he had to fall into it. Even if it's really out of thin air, no one can resist the temptation of the ancient weapon Pluton blueprint. When they first heard that Pluton's blueprint was in Water 7, they fell into a trap. That kid must have done this on purpose. In the spacious and bright hall, the highest power of the world government, Gorosei, 5 great elders, lived here. This is also the place where they usually discuss and work. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, who had bronze skin and blonde hair, had a cold look in his eyes. He was sure that Dustless did this. He let Blueno hear the news about Pluton's blueprint on purpose. The purpose was to attract their attention. Indeed, he designed a trap that we had to fall into. The bald Kuang Lao Xing who was holding the saber frowned and said. There was an evil and cruel aura between his eyebrows. They had always been in the upper hand in the past several fights with Wu Chen. They hadn't expected that the counterattack would be so fierce this time. They were caught off guard. Even if it's nonsense, they must send undercover agents to check it out. Rumors come from nowhere. Water 7 was responsible for the construction of Pluto, so it's normal for other blueprints to exist. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, said with a face full of wisdom. He was the tallest among the 5, so he immediately attracted the attention of the other 4. The other 4 Gorosei, 5 great elders, nodded in agreement. It's not impossible to keep a copy of Pluton's blueprint just in case. Anyway, this isn't a trap. We're definitely going to fall into it. With a sigh, the Gorosei, 5 great elders, said helplessly. They used to be the dominant force, but now they're suddenly pulled down. With the help of the Pluton's blueprint incident, that kid painstakingly led our attention to Water 7. It's definitely not a good thing. He must be secretly planning some unknown conspiracy. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, said gloomily. It's not that they haven't schemed against Dustless before, but every time they were easily broken by him, and they were slapped in the face. Hearing this, the other 5 Elder Stars all had gloomy faces, including the 5 Elder Stars with long hair and beard who had been talking loudly before. In the past, they had also fought with each other. They were the ones who played dirty, but in the end, they were the ones who were played dirty. Now that Dustless took the initiative to make a move, they really didn't have much confidence in winning. It doesn't matter, we will send a few CP9 members to Water 7 as spies. They were the ones who discovered Pluton's blueprint, so it doesn't matter if they are spies. Even if they all die in the end, they are just small pawns, it's not a big deal. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, with a scar on his forehead said coldly. Everyone knows this simple truth. Chapter 565. 3 days later in the system world. In the pavilion, Dustless's expression was different from before. There was a rare look of anxiety and impatience on his face, and his calm eyes also splashed out ripples and waves. His heart also became restless. I couldn't tell that you would actually lose your composure over this kind of thing. The ethereal celestial voice spread, and the system consciousness Ling, looked at Dustless in surprise. Dustless gave people the feeling that he was an emotionless robot. Just like today, he showed an anxious expression from time to time. Who knows how many times in his life? Could it be that you think I'm a stone with a heart of stone? I'm also a person of flesh and blood. Dustless stared at Linger in annoyance and said impatiently. Around dawn, System Ling, told Dustless that Huiji's due date had arrived. Since then, his heart had not been at ease, and it was in his throat, like the waves of the sea, sometimes high and sometimes low. His Dao heart that was as immovable as a rock also began to loosen. Humans were not plants and could not be emotionless. Although Dustless's temperament was unusually cold, he was not a stubborn stone that did not understand the affairs of the world. He always maintained concern for his own people, but he, who was not good with words, had always hidden this sincere feeling in his heart, and only silently guarded it. There was no need to make it known to everyone. There was a saying that everything was interconnected, and some things did not need to be explained at all. On the contrary, sometimes things would go in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme, and the more one explained, the darker it would become. Everything was fine as long as one let nature take its course. System Ling, looked at Dustless with a smile, with an understanding attitude. As a father for the first time, it was normal for him to feel a little nervous. After all, this was also the first time Dustless experienced this. Anyway, I rarely see such an anxious expression on your face. In my impression, this is the first time I've seen you. A light voice with loneliness and sadness came from behind, like a supreme celestial voice, soothing one's heart. However, at this moment, Dustless was unable to be happy. His face stiffened with a hint of guilt. Looking back, he saw Otsutsuki Hiruo, whom he hadn't seen for a while. At this moment, she looked a little sad. Her face was as pale as the snow in the winter. Her face was full of loneliness. She clenched her silver teeth, and the corners of her mouth were extremely bitter. There were even some obvious cracks. I'm really sorry. The corners of Dustless's mouth wriggled. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife, and he was speechless and extremely guilty. He had spent the most time with Yu Luo. The latter had always wanted to have a child, but to this day, she still couldn't fulfill her wish. Instead, it was Huey who came later who got there first. I don't want you to. Glancing at Dustless in disappointment, Yu Luo's eyes were dim and lifeless. Her silvery hair had also become much whiter. Her entire body was emitting an extremely powerless feeling of hesitation and loss. Her heavenly beauty gave others the feeling that she had become much older in an instant. Seeing this, Dustless's heart clenched, and he was just about to persuade her when the clear and melodious cry of a child resounded. Woo! Dustless was stunned. Looking at Kagaya's delivery room, his body turned into a gust of wind and rushed forward. Breaking the door and entering, a stunning woman with golden hair was reflected in Dustless's eyes. She was dressed quite casually, with light makeup and no makeup, and her skin was as white as snow. She didn't need to be deliberately dressed up. Her whole person was natural and unrestrained, giving people a very magnanimous and natural feeling. Looking around, it was Tsunade with golden hair. As a medical ninja, she knew much more than Dustless, and the task of delivering the baby inevitably fell on her. At this moment, Tsunade was holding a little doll carved out of jade in her hand. Its black eyes were moving nimbly, and its delicate skin was as white as snow. It was no different from Kagaya, and there were two cute horns on its head. Staring blankly at the tender child in Tsunade's arms, Dustless spontaneously felt a sense of blood connection, and an inexplicable special force connected him and the baby in swaddling clothes. Yaya. It seemed that it also felt a sense of intimacy with Dustless, and the tender baby waved at Dustless with its fangs and claws. Its dark eyes were sparkling with tears, and it was anxious to get out of Tsunade's arms. It looked like it was about to cry, and it evoked the sympathy and pity that had disappeared for countless years in Dustless's heart. Heartless little brat. Wasting so much of my energy. You forgot about the midwife when you saw your father. Tsunade rolled her eyes and angrily handed the baby in her arms to Dustless. She put her hands on her hips and shouted, "This heartless little girl is as heartless as you. No wonder you are father and daughter. You don't know how to express your gratitude to me. After all, I was the one who delivered the baby. Even if there is no credit, there should be hard work." Tsunade complained with dissatisfaction. This little girl was too much. She cried and made a fuss in her arms, but when she was in Dustless's hands, she immediately smiled. Seeing that Dustless and the baby in his arms were so close, Tsunade's calm eyes were filled with jealousy. Then she walked to Dustless's side, and her slender fingers gently pinched the little girl's little face and teased. "Is it a girl?" Remembering what Tsunade said before, he subconsciously looked down at the lower body. Sure enough, as Tsunade said, the future will definitely be a beautiful young lady. Quietly looking at the little girl's dark pupils, Dustless was confused. He felt that this day came unexpectedly, and he didn't even do the most basic preparation. When he was daydreaming, he suddenly felt a wet face, and his empty thoughts suddenly came back to him. Pachi! In the twinkling of an eye, Wu Chen's face was left with a little girl's mouthmark, which was full of water stains. Wu Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In his life, it was the first time that his face was attacked by others. This little girl is very clever. Tsunade's eyes widened, and her watery eyes looked at the little girl in surprise. For a moment, she caught a cunning look that didn't belong to her age from those black eyes. Nonsense! Don't you know whose flesh and blood you are? Hearing this, Dustless's face was full of pride, and his high tone was filled with endless pride. This little girl can be seen from her eyes that she is a clever little girl. It's my fault that my genes are too strong, and so is my daughter. Chapter 566. Looking at the radiant and spirited Dustless, Tsunade was also filled with emotion for a while. After Dustless's former enemies saw his expression, they would probably crawl out of hell unwillingly. In his impression, Dustless was just a villain who did not commit any of the 10 evils. Bring it over for me to see. A weak and light voice spread out and entered the ears of Dustless and Tsunade. Turning their heads, the owner of this weak voice was Kaguya, who was sweating all over. At this moment, her face was pale, revealing a sense of helplessness from her soul. The birth of Smarty had almost exhausted all the effort she had accumulated in her life. Compared to Dustless, who only worried but didn't put in any effort, Huey had sacrificed too much. Yeah. Little Smarty's clear eyes looked at Huey G and blinked. From Huey G's kind eyes, she caught a glimpse of love and gentleness. The immature but powerful body twisted again, and he raised his thin arms and threw himself into Kaguya's arms. Obviously, he was tired of Dustless. Pucci! Tsunade couldn't help laughing when she saw this scene. Her delicate face bloomed with a beautiful smile, and her bell-like laughter was pleasant to listen to. She teased Dustless with interest. You forgot your father when you had your mother. It seems that you are just like that. It is the nature of babies to look for their mother's care. Handing the child in his hand to Kaguya, Dustless did not deny Tsunade's words. It was indeed as she said. It's been hard on you. Staring at Kaguya with complex gratitude, Dustless's tone was as heavy as Mount Tai, and his bright eyes looked at Kaguya. His words were completely from the bottom of his heart, and there was no hypocrisy. It's okay, you can recover after a while. Taking the immature baby in Dustless's hand, Kaguya nodded slightly with a sweet smile on her face. She can naturally feel Dustless's sincerity. A sincere greeting was far more useful than thousands of hypocritical sweet words. Speaking of which, what's this little girl's name? Her eyes fell on Dustless's body. Tsunade frowned and asked. The little clever boy came and went for a short time, but after a long time, it sounded very harsh. Isn't that obvious? Dustless rolled his eyes at Tsunade and said bluntly, children follow their father's surname. This is a principle that has never changed since ancient times. Of course it's called Uchiha. Suddenly, 2 cold eyes locked on him. Wu Chen's words came to an abrupt end. One of them was Kaguya, and the other was Otsutsuki Haruo, who was rushing over. It's really strange. These 2 women's tempers have always been at odds. It's rare for them to have the same opinion today. Dustless thought helplessly in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel extremely conflicted. He had already guessed that the naming process, which should have been smooth, was the most difficult process. I think the surname should be Otsutsuki. The Uchiha surname is indeed glorious, but it's already a thing of the past. Now, everything has changed, and I'm in a foreign country. All in all, there's no need to respect those ridiculous truths. Glancing at Dustless, Haruo said her intention, and the determination in her eyes was unshakable. What you said is true. Kaguya nodded towards Dustless to express her point of view. From the beginning to the end, Kaguya has maintained a contemptuous attitude towards Uchiha. It's just a branch of Otsutsuki, and as Haruo said before, there is no need to adhere to the rules in a foreign country. Yeah. Seeing that she was ignored, the little girl's inarticulate voice sounded. She seemed to hear the conversation between several people and quite agreed with Haruo's statement. Seeing this, Dustless's forehead was full of black lines. Dustless can't change the principles summarized by the ancient sages at will, and the idea of children following their father's surname has been deeply ingrained. It's impossible to change Dustless easily. Ahem. Clearing his throat, Dustless chuckled and said, It doesn't matter. I am a very democratic person. What the surname is, it will be decided by her in the future. Pointing to the baby in Kaguya's arms, Dustless said, If you are democratic, you should vote. Looking at Dustless with disdain, Tsunade said contemptuously. She knew that Dustless deliberately played Taiji Fist to fool her. In the future, as long as she is tempted a little, this little girl may change sides and jump into Dustless's arms. Children are always naive. Up to you. Huey clearly didn't want to dwell on such a question. She just focused on teasing the red-faced Smarty, occasionally letting out crisp laughter. Everyone, including Dustless and Yuluo Tsuna, looked at the scene in front of them harmoniously. When the cold Kaguya revealed this kind face, it was no less than the sun rising from the south. She will be called Yushi from now on. After a moment of silence, Wu Chen gave him a name. It was not appropriate to call him that. Even if he didn't have a surname, he needed a name. Otsutsuki Suki or Uchiha Suki. Sounds good. But is there any special meaning? Yu Luo nodded in satisfaction after trying to read it 2 or 3 times. Then, he turned to Dustless and asked expectantly. This name was indeed not bad and sounded quite elegant. Huey Ji also hummed the new name of Little Smarty. After a while, she revealed a knowing smile. It seemed that she was quite satisfied with the name Dustless gave her. However, the baby in her arms puffed up her cheeks and bared her fangs at Dustless. She seemed to be extremely dissatisfied, but her protest was ignored by everyone. Meaning? Is this necessary? Just say it smoothly. Dustless was speechless by Yu Luo's question, and he went straight to the point. After the words fell, even Kaguya stared at Dustless with dissatisfaction. The name has been the most important thing since ancient times. She didn't expect Dustless to be so perfunctory. Dustless felt as if he had been shot even though he was lying down. Only then did he suddenly remember that compared to him, a surpasser from the 3rd dimension, people like Kaguya were still considered old antiques. It was indeed difficult for him to accept the idea of transcending dimensions. Chapter 567. There was an insurmountable gap between the thinking of modern people and ancient people. It was impossible for them to accept Dustless's thinking ability in a short period of time. After hundreds and thousands of years of changes, the generation gap was not something that could be ignored. Fortunately, after a while of talking, Kaguya and the others reluctantly accepted Dustless's proposed name, just as Dustless explained before. The name was not important. The most important thing was to communicate with each other. The key was the meaning. Although the explanation was extremely far-fetched, after some coaxing and pestering, the girls nodded in agreement. Dustless originally wanted to let Kaguya and her daughter see the outside world. Being trapped in the system space for a long time was not a long-term solution, but Kaguya unexpectedly refused. The reason was quite simple. With the addition of the little life form Yushi, Huey's boring life was no longer monotonous. Compared to before, it was much more colorful and interesting. Her ambition that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth slowly faded. Forget it. Looking at the mother and daughter entangled in harmony with each other, Dustless also stopped the plan to take little Yueshi out. This was too cruel and unfair to Kaguya, and Dustless did not have the skills to take care of children. It was enough to let her live quietly and peacefully. You are too easily satisfied. Also, my dream is still a bubble. Seeing Dustless's complacent expression, Yu Luo was quite dissatisfied. She did not hide the blame in her tone. The plan in her mind to give birth to a nest of children had not been realized yet. Just go with the flow. You also know that this kind of thing depends on fate. In short, you can't blame me. Dustless shrugged, with an expression that had nothing to do with him. Yu Luo's mouth twitched, and gloomily stared at Dustless. No one was an idiot. Dustless's words implied that there was a problem with her body. She wanted to refute, but there was no way to refute. Dustless and Kaguya hit the mark, and countless times with her, there was no movement at all. This had already quietly explained everything. This is an illness. It has to be treated. Dustless gently patted Yu Luo's shoulder and said with a smile. The ridicule in his tone was not concealed at all. Following which, his body dissipated without any warning like a breeze, forever disappearing from this world. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace, and his aura was completely gone. Warm sunlight poured down from the 9 heavens. The whole world was bathed in the scorching sun. It was full of vitality and vitality. It made people temporarily forget that this was an extremely distorted world. Coincidentally, some people were not used to this warm sun. The Akagami, red hair, pirates, who had escaped from death, were desolate and bleak. The momentum that swept the sea in the past was gone with the wind. The battleships docked at the coast were almost destroyed. Looking at it, it was full of traces of the waves. In the past, the Akagami, red hair, pirates were domineering, traversing the 4 seas, sweeping the New World, and stepping on the top of the Yonko for emperors. Now, only a few of them were left. It was exactly the same as the saying, when one reaches the pinnacle of prosperity, one will inevitably decline. It was all because of that man's single thought that brought disaster to his name. Years of dreams, painstaking efforts, all turned into nothing in an instant. He was even reduced to a state where he was about to be erased. New world. I will definitely come back again. The powerful oath resounded through the sky. Akagami, red hair. Shanks then left with the remaining crew members, and the lonely shadow gradually lengthened and disappeared on the sea. Dustless, the originator of the Akagami, red hair pirates, was extremely proud. People were in high spirits when they were happy, and sometimes he would show a knowing smile. This made Hancock think that the sun had emerged from the bottom of the sea. On the balcony, Dustless was lying on the couch. The birth of Little Moon she really made him in a good mood, and his mouth was humming a song involuntarily. He didn't even notice the sudden appearance of a figure. This time there may be a chance. Doflamingo's eyes squinted and he peeped at Dustless's expression without a trace. There was a smile on his face, and he was still a wanted pirate. Although the position of Shichibukai was still a step away, it was only a short distance away. Dustless didn't help him add fuel to the fire, and it would be difficult for him to get to the top. In the near future, I will help you get the position of Shichibukai as soon as possible. We must seize the throne of King Dressrosa as soon as possible and drag the original Liku royal family down from the altar. Before Doflamingo could speak, Dustless spoke first, and his cold voice was filled with killing intent. It's true that we should speed up the pace. Caesar seems to have been caught by Sakazuki, but in the end, thanks to your help, the old boy would have to go to prison again. Doflamingo smiled flatteringly, and his tone was full of flattery, and he had completely given up the so-called dignity. It's not too late to pick up his dignity when his wings grow hard in the future. Now he's just a stray dog. The identity of the celestial dragons doesn't have much of a deterrent effect on the Gorosei, 5 elder stars. What's more, their Don Quixote family has no power of the celestial dragons. If they lose the protection of Dustless, they will die. It's not just him, Caesar is the same, so Doflamingo is unusually obedient. Glancing at Doflamingo faintly, Dustless didn't say anything. It was the opposite of the way he met Hancock before. In the face of these subordinates who are not subordinates, the necessary oppression is still necessary. The reason why he chose to let Doflamingo sit on the Shichibukai in advance is entirely because Caesar's trace is exposed. The construction of Pluton must have a quiet environment. Only after Doflamingo sits on the Shichibukai, he can also seek the king's position of Dressrosa to shelter Caesar. What are the specific steps? Lowering his posture, Doflamingo asked in a low voice. It's very simple. Lead your pirate group to destroy everything. The loss is enough to make the Marines unable to bear it. At that time, they will naturally come to you to compromise. It doesn't matter if it's big. Behind me is your foothold. The simplest and most effective way is to be rude and direct. This is the truth that will never change. Bastard, Doflamingo, this beast. One day I will tear him to pieces to vent the hatred in my heart. The angry Sengoku tore the information in his hand. His eyes were bloody red, and his whole body was releasing a huge oppressive aura, and the whole office was shaking. Bah! After swallowing confidential documents, the goat whined twice and fainted. Doflamingo was a celestial dragon. Even though the Don Quixote clan had given up the privilege of being a celestial dragon, Doflamingo was still a celestial dragon from the beginning to the end. This identity alone was enough to render them helpless, not to mention the mastermind behind him. This damn ant was obviously extremely fragile, but he always jumped around and ignored the Marine, and even smacked the Marine's face. Sengoku's feelings were self-evident. This was the feeling of having to suffer in silence, unable to voice out the bitterness. Humph! Boom! Kaka! Staring coldly at the proud and arrogant Doflamingo in the newspaper, Sengoku saw Doflamingo laughing at the Marine. He didn't even think about it. He condensed the original transparent air shield in his hand and directly shattered it, turning it into goose feather-like fluttering snow. Bang bang bang! The dull sound of knocking on the door made Sengoku frown. When did the Marine become so unruly? When he was about to verbally reprimand, a tall figure directly broke the door. That guy Z left Marin on a battleship. Without waiting for Sengoku to ask, Garp, who was wearing a dog head hat, said. Hearing this, Sengoku frowned deeply, and his voice was hoarse, and he said seriously. His students were slaughtered by that bastard Doflamingo yesterday. Maybe he went to find trouble with Doflamingo. Yesterday, the Marine ship unfortunately encountered Doflamingo, and almost all of them were killed, and only a few escaped. With such deep hatred, how can Z swallow his anger? A few years ago, Z's wife and son were brutally killed by pirates. At that time, he hated pirates, and now the new hatred plus the old hatred aroused the flame in Z's heart. The destination of that guy's voyage is not the sea where Doflamingo is located. Garp shook his head. Sengoku suddenly looked at Garp with his pupils enlarged, and his old eyes were filled with awe-inspiring luster. A bad idea swept through his mind, and his fists were as big as a bucket. Looking at Sengoku's eyes, Garp nodded and said in a heavy tone, Z is likely to take the students who survived to Mariehua to question the man. Z knows that temporarily repelling Doflamingo won't solve the root of the problem. Only by completely stopping Royce South can he stop Doflamingo's plot against the Marine. But Z is a very intelligent and sensitive man. He shouldn't fight with him. So there is no need to worry. Garp said with uncertainty. He also had doubts about what he said, but he just hoped so. Sengoku smiled bitterly and regretted for a while. If he had given the position of 7 warlords of the sea to Doflamingo, there would not be such a situation. Chapter 569. Early in the morning 3 days later, the bloody storm set off by Doflamingo still continued. The fierce name of Heaven's Wuxia spread throughout the New World. Even small places like the Four Seas could hear his nickname. Countless Navy battleships were destroyed by him, and countless Navy soldiers were killed by him. Not only that, Doflamingo's claws also reached out to ordinary civilians. The Marine could only swallow their anger, not to mention these weak civilians. Therefore, the number of islands and towns destroyed by Doflamingo was more than the number of hands. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, who couldn't bear it, finally gave the title of Shichibukai to Doflamingo. Although he couldn't wait to tear him into pieces, he didn't dare to kill him. The name of Tenryubito was too terrible. The law did not allow the Marine to kill Tenryubito. Afterward, Doflamingo also became Shichibukai. On the Blue Sea, Marine battleships moved forward rapidly. The sea rippled and expanded to swallow the surrounding sea. Damn Doflamingo! Z's heavy roar sounded in the cabin. His hand slightly smashed the table in front of him. It was as easy as blowing air. Only in this way could he vent the burning flames in his heart. This is the so-called Marine. What kind of justice is this? Or is the definition of justice the winner is king and the loser is a bandit? Is this the justice I pursue? Z's eyes were dim. For the first time in his life, he doubted his faith. Marine headquarters held the loud slogan of absolute justice all day long. But their inner nature was no different from those pirates. They were afraid of the strong bullying the weak. The strong preyed on the weak and the strong was respected. When the law of the jungle forced the word justice, the surface did not change but the inside was rotten. His beloved student was slaughtered by pirates. As the embodiment of justice, the Marine couldn't crusade against evil. Not only that, but now from the Marine's predicament, to a large extent, they will collude with the so-called Shichibukai in the future. This is not the righteous Marine that Z pursued. It is contrary to his beliefs. In the past, he was confident that the Marine has fallen into hell. Teacher! A haggard and weak voice came from outside the cabin. Z raised his head and pushed open the cabin door. A group of exhausted students were reflected in his eyes. His old eyes swept across the students one by one. Z lowered his head, his face full of guilt. In the end, I also chose to give in. I am not qualified to criticize Sengoku. Z said with a forced smile. Doflamingo acted recklessly, slaughtering the Marine Corps like slaughtering dogs. Countless soldiers were wailing and trembling under his hands. Z didn't stand up to arrest Doflamingo, just like when his chess piece was killed, he chose to remain silent. Why did he choose to remain silent? There was no other reason. Doflamingo was a celestial dragon, and behind him was Lois South, a behemoth that could cover the sky with one hand. Z's thoughts of revenge were extinguished, and he continued to remain silent. Because they are celestial dragons. In this world, celestial dragons are synonymous with justice. The laws of the world are all made by them. Justice is judged by them. So is life and death. Those who resist their rule are the enemies of justice. In other words, the enemies of celestial dragons are the embodiment of evil. Z who believes that justice will prevail will certainly not resist celestial dragons. In today's world, celestial dragons have become a manifestation of justice. Only by respecting celestial dragons is justice. Resistance is evil. Such a ridiculous truth has deceived the world for more than 800 years, but no one can jump out of the nightmare created by justice. Until now, Z felt like it was a lifetime ago. He suddenly woke up. The justice that I seek is sacred, not this kind of twisted justice that has been rewritten by others. Staring at the looming Mariehua in the clouds in the distance, Z's loud roar contained the firmness of a rock. The ruthlessness of celestial dragons is well known to the world. They are evil butchers dressed in the cloak of justice. They themselves are the dirtiest existence. The Marine is also an accomplice to evil. Z, who was a Marine admiral in the past, is no exception. Therefore Z has an amazing conclusion. The most evil existence in the world is not pirates, nor is it the Yonko for emperors, but the forces led by celestial dragons. They are the most evil existence in the world. In the name of hypocritical justice, their shadows cover the sky and the sun. The scope of slavery is more than an island and a small piece of the sea. The location of radiation is the whole world. Today, Z realized that compared to those pirates who chase their dreams, he who was loyal to the world government and loyal to celestial dragons in the past was more evil. In the early morning, Mariehua was filled with countless mist, looming in the clouds and mist, connecting the sky and the earth. It was beautiful. Mariehua is not only the headquarters of the world government, but also the gathering place of celestial dragons. It covers a large area and is difficult to estimate. Looking as far as the eye can see, Mariehua standing on the red line is spectacular. Looking at the world today, it is unique, and its momentum is unique. The Marine battleship actually took the initiative to come to Mariehua. It's rare. His sharp eyes penetrated the heavy fog, and the galloping Marine battleship appeared in Dustless's eyes. After a glance, Dustless withdrew his gaze. He was very busy these days. Most of the time was spent in the world of the system. Accompanying Kagaya all day and playing with little Ueshi was boring, but it was also a good way to spend a long time. Just as he was about to get into the system world, the sound of the Den Den Mushi in his arms came into Dustless's ears. He frowned slightly and then took out the black Den Den Mushi. This is... Z, what is he looking for me for, or is it for Doflamingo? The doubts in his eyes turned into speculation. Dustless learned that Doflamingo recently killed many of Z's students. Chapter 570. Time slipped away unknowingly, and in the blink of an eye, 5 hours passed quietly. In the spacious and bright room, Dustless looked doubtful, and his deep black eyes restored indifference. He was sure that Z's visit was not a good thing. The weasel paying a visit to the chicken is not a good thing. Doflamingo's recent lawlessness, Dustless also heard a little about it. But in his view, it was just a small fuss. The effect was negligible. Unexpectedly, Sengoku chose to compromise and agreed to Doflamingo's conditions and promised him the position of Shichibukai. I'm afraid that old guy is also tormented to the point that he can't stand it anymore. Dustless had some admiration for this clown Doflamingo. Doflamingo ambushed the Marines. Most of them were young and had good qualifications. Once these people grow up in the future, their room for improvement is infinite. Even one or two of them can become the mainstay of the Marines, turning into fertile soil to protect the towering tree of the Marines. However, Doflamingo had cut him in half at the waist and killed him mercilessly. More than 90% of the freshmen were taught by Z, and they get along with each other day and night. Their feelings must have reached a very deep level, and even reached a deep level of father and son. So that's how it is. You know it's useless to deal with Doflamingo, so you came to me. Giving up what's close at hand to seek what's far away. Wu Chen's gentle expression was full of contempt. He instantly understood Z's intention. But do you think it's useful to find me? Relying on your strength, you want me to yield? That's a fantasy, Z. Frankly speaking, Dustless quite sympathized with him. He worked hard for the Marines all his life, and when his life was about to wither, it was his student Borsellino Kizaru, who personally sent him to his death. The rise and fall of the Marines are caused by the Marines, and they are destroyed by the Marines. His feelings are pitiful, his actions are excusable, but his crime is punishable. Dustless sneered. A tall and broad figure walked in. He had purple hair and wore glasses. If one ignored the cold glint in his eyes, he was dressed quite elegantly. The two of them looked at each other. Because of sitting on the stairs, Dustless was taller than Z. Dustless was looking down at him. First of all, Z's aura was already at a disadvantage, which made him quite uncomfortable. I still remember that you are the honorary admiral of the Marine, so why did you choose to be the enemy of justice? Clenching his fists, countless blue veins were vaguely visible on his arms, Z coldly questioned. What Doflamingo did was the result of your indulgence and indifference. At the end of his speech, Z's eyes were emitting cold air. Towards Doflamingo, Z couldn't wait to tear him into pieces. Unless he directly killed him, he wouldn't be able to solve the problem. You came all the way here. Sit down and soothe your throat first. Pointing to the left side of the sofa, Dustless signaled Z to sit there. As for the cold questioning tone, he ignored it and quietly tasted the fragrant tea in his hand. As if nothing happened, Dustless was unusually quiet. This kind of indifference made Z's resentment towards Dustless soar. Justice? Z, you are not young anymore. All day long you still talk about justice. Sometimes I really feel like you are a child who hasn't grown up. Looking at Z, Wu Chen sneered and didn't hide his sarcasm. I think you are a child who hasn't grown up. You don't understand the essence of justice. Z's old face tightened. He didn't hesitate to show weakness. Then tell me your understanding of justice. I'm all ears. The corners of his mouth curled up with a hint of ridicule. That pair of deep eyes flashed with ridicule, as if he was sizing up a clown, looking down at Z from above. Their identities were suddenly reversed. Dustless was more like a deep audience, quietly waiting for the clown's performance on the stage. What kind of attitude is this? Z's tone raised a few decibels as he said in an even more oppressive tone. Dustless's indifference and even contempt had touched Z's bottom line. His student was killed. Dustless not only didn't show any sign of remorse, this cold and perfunctory attitude made Z feel contempt. This is my attitude towards the justice you speak of. It doesn't matter who is right or wrong, because the final say is not in their hands. Lightly glancing at Z, Dustless said without any emotion. What is justice? When you ignore this inherent definition, you will find that the one who can judge evil and justice is actually the one with the biggest fist. Justice? The winner is the justice. It's so simple. For example, Dustless's mouth raised a cold arc. His body disappeared in an instant and disappeared into the darkness. His speed has reached the realm of perfection, escaping the perception of Z's observation hockey. This guy is using some kind of ability to move, not relying on the speed of his body. Z's body stiffened. Now my fist is bigger than yours, so I can judge that you are an evil person. If I say you are guilty, then you are guilty. A demonic whisper entered Z's ears, followed by a flash of golden light. Armament hockey hardening. With a low shout, the surface of his body was replaced by a dark color. Z had long predicted that Dustless would take the opportunity to use armament hockey. Clang! An ear-piercing boom spread throughout the entire room, and an invisible ripple spread out, causing everyone to feel dizzy. All the decorations in the room instantly exploded. Ka. Under the impact of the brute force, the geographical position of the entire room was dislocated. Despicable! Knowing that Dustless is an ability user, Z's right arm was also covered with armament hockey. His fist was enough to smash a giant building, and he mercilessly punched his head. Chapter 571. Z was shocked and angry. He originally wanted to persuade Dustless to stop and restrain Doflamingo. But he didn't expect Dustless to reach for a yard after getting an inch. Just because of a verbal disagreement, Dustless attacked. He turned his face faster than flipping a book. Ka. The powerful fist that was enough to crush a Navy warship suddenly fell on Dustless. He didn't dodge and his brain exploded in an instant. The ground was splashed with dark red bloodstains. The scene was extremely bloody and violent. He was blown out of shape. That's impossible. Instead of feeling happy, Z tightened his nerves. His observation hockey spread out, guarding the surrounding environment. If Dustless could be killed so easily, he would have died hundreds of times. When he first came to Mariehua, he was defeated by Dustless. Even if Z used all his strength at that time, he was still afraid of Dustless's power. At that time, Dustless didn't break out all his strength. The humans in your world are really monsters. Physical skills can be practiced to such a terrifying level. It's obvious that you are already in your twilight years but still have such a powerful strength. Incredible. Z's voice was full of praise. Then he saw that Wu Chen was still sitting in his original position, and was still savoring the fragrant tea in his hand. He was sizing up Z from a bird's eye view. When he turned around, he saw that Wu Chen had disappeared into thin air. The bloodstains on the ground also disappeared. It was as if nothing had happened. Everything was back to the original problem. Not only that, Z also felt an abnormal pain in his arm. This guy, when did he do it? I was the one who defeated him, so why is this happening? Z's eyes solidified, looking at his smoking arm. His gloomy face was hard to hide. He can penetrate the defense made by my armament hockey. Has he reached such a level at such a young age? Looking up, Z saw that Z's right arm has been completely penetrated. The wound was as big as a thumb. It was obviously a scorching type attack. The wound has been burned and it's only a minor injury. Was what just happened an illusion? For the first time in his life, Z felt that his eyes were blurred and there was visual confusion. Reality and illusion are often only separated by a single thought. Everything is like the moon in the water. What you see is only the reflection of the light in the water. It is only a pure illusion. Seeing Z's face full of hesitation and bewilderment, Wu Chen explained in a soft voice. Just a few casual words, but it contained the truth of the world. Z suddenly became enlightened. He looked up at Dustless, who was close at hand. Even if it only takes a few short steps to reach Dustless, the gap between them gave Z a sense of powerlessness. Even if it was only a few inches, Z was sure that as long as Wu Chen wanted to, he would never be able to touch him. This was not a gap in strength, but a huge gap in dimension. It was a gap that was difficult to cross just by relying on hard work. Why didn't you kill me? You can injure me, which means you can take my life. Z asked in a deep voice. His tone was full of puzzlement and deep doubts. Carefully looking at the small wound on his arm, Z suddenly understood that this was not a life-and-death battle but more like a fight between children. Dustless casually smiled and didn't want to be serious. Casually playing around is fine. There is no need to fight to the death. Z was shocked that he was like a powerless clown. He couldn't make waves. He could only be controlled by Dustless. He was even sure that if he wanted to, he would have been killed on the spot by Dustless. Your life will naturally be taken by someone else, that's all. Staring at Z with deep meaning, Dustless shook his head without leaving a trace. He can see that Z loves the Marine very much. For this, he was willing to give up his life. Today, he dared to face Dustless head-on. This shows that he is willing to give up everything. However, in the later days, such a person who loved the Marine so much without any hesitation hated the entire Marine headquarters to the bone. He wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible. The huge contrast really makes people feel that the world is fickle and the fate of many ghosts. There is no need to kill you because Doflamingo has become one of the Shichibukai. His thumb slightly hooked and the newspaper floated in front of Z. The content that caught his eyes was the laughing Doflamingo. At this moment, he has become a member of the Shichibukai organization. Z looked at Doflamingo in the newspaper. His previous worldview gradually collapsed. He didn't expect that Doflamingo, this kind of butcher, could join the Shichibukai organization. A large number of Marine rookies died in his hands. How can this garbage join the Shichibukai to show off? He killed countless Marines and didn't get the punishment he deserved. How can Z accept this? Most of the Marine interns who were killed were his students. If you want to blame someone, blame your own fate, Z. Staring at Z's pale face, Dustless had some sympathy for him. Z in front of him was like a candle in the wind. Extremely fragile. The Marine who was loyal to him betrayed him. It's not hard to imagine how he would feel. I'm afraid he is completely disappointed and desperate. This kind of thing can't be accepted by anyone. This guy's heart is very broad. Wu Chen secretly said in his heart. He admired Z a little more. If someone dared to betray him, even if he chased him to the ends of the earth, Wu Chen would tear him into pieces as a warning to others. Unknowingly, Zi's mentality began to quietly change. For the Marines he loved in the past, his heart's desire to protect them gradually decreased. There was even a bit of hatred in his heart. However, he still suppressed this irritable feeling of resentment. Dustless saw this and just smiled. The reason why Z betrayed the Marine is not because of other factors, but because he was forced to embark on this thorny road of no return. Chapter 572. Z almost collapsed. He didn't expect the Marine to be so unbearable. He didn't choose to resist but shamefully bowed his head. It also indirectly means that his students who died in the battle are doomed to be unable to avenge them and can only swallow their anger. Thinking about the future, Doflamingo, this kind of evil person can continue to bring disaster to the world intact. Z's forehead had a ferocious veins undulating, and his steady breathing also became coarse. Z's mind was in a trance. In the unseen world he could hear the souls of the fallen students. Their unwilling and mournful cries pierced through his ears and into his brain, driving his will. Dying in the hands of pirates can be said to be a disguised form of martyrdom. Falling in the hands of Shichibukai will only make them a laughingstock, because to some extent they can be regarded as one of us. See off the guest. After glancing at Z, Dustless closed his eyes and said casually. Dustless turned a deaf ear to Z's offensive impulse. He is a Marine Admiral-level character, and he is indeed a tragic character. Forgiving him once is not a big deal. Please. Hancock made an elegant gesture to Z, indicating that Z can leave. Z's cold eyes looked at Dustless. He seemed to be hesitating whether to leave or not, but after glancing at the Marine battleship docked in the harbor, he resolutely turned and left. This old guy is so tactful. Seeing Z simply turn around and leave, Wu Chen opened his eyes. Z gave him a simple feeling that he was the type of stubborn old man. He was the type of old man who would stick to the rules. Whiz! Suddenly there was a strong wind in front of him. Dustless was slightly surprised. He immediately raised his eyelids and saw the tall body of Z, who took the opportunity to attack. Boom boom boom. The powerful fist blasted over with full force. Just as it was about to crush Dustless, his entire person strangely disappeared. It was as if he had completely integrated into the void, disappearing without a trace in an instant. I knew you wouldn't leave so easily. Z turned to look at Dustless, whose left eye turned into Sharingan, and sneered. When facing pirates, have you ever seen a Marine Admiral who fled without fighting? Subconsciously, Z has classified Wu Chen as a type of pirate. Even compared to the pirates who commit all kinds of crimes, he knows how to use the power given by the government to be more evil. Z felt that using the word pirate to describe Wu Chen was simply an insult to the word. Marine Admiral who fled without fighting? Maybe there will be one in the history of the Marine today. A demonic whisper sounded in Z's ears, and Dustless was not in a hurry to fight his opponent. If I didn't guess wrong, when you went to Mariehua, you also brought your students who were struggling at death's door. Looking at Z's strong body, Dustless said with a smile. You bastard, don't tell me you want to. Hearing this, Z's eyes were about to split open. His eyes were burning with flames. He wasn't an idiot. What Wu Chen meant was that he was going to make a move on that group of students. A peerless master without the slightest cultivation, despicable to such a shameless degree. He would choose to attack a group of students who have no power to truss a chicken. This is the first time Z has seen it. Ka. Without thinking, Z broke the window and jumped out of the 10-meter-high window. His body fell straight to the ground and swept toward the battleship docked on the shore like a hurricane. Z was determined to protect the remaining students even if he had to risk his life. Ah, this old guy is really fickle. He just said that there is no Marine Admiral who retreats without fighting, and now he is running away. Staring at the black ink spots that have gradually disappeared in the distance, Dustless touched his forehead and seemed quite helpless. His tangled tone seemed to be a headache for Z. Young master, when did you send someone to attack his crew? Hancock elegantly stood beside Dustless, tilted her head and curiously asked. Dustless didn't contact anyone for a quarter of an hour. When did he order his men to attack Z's fleet? She was really curious. Attack? I didn't send anyone to attack. I just used Z's mentality to worry about his companions. In the final analysis, he is still a righteous person. In his eyes, the lives of the students are more important than mine, so he was so impatient. Dustless replied calmly. He was just using Z's mentality to make a sneak attack. If at this moment Z was replaced by a Kainu, he wouldn't care about this group of people. Anyway, it's just a few insignificant pawns. It's not a big deal. No one will care about it. Every day, there are countless soldiers all over the world dying in battle. Master, you are really cunning. Hancock didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't expect Dustless to be so proficient in playing tricks. But will he go and come back? Her eyes fell on Dustless's body. Hancock asked with concern. Z's strength was unfathomable, and the entire Mariehua might be destroyed by the fight. Of course, this is only the case where the five deliberately indulge. Well, thinking of Z's nature, Wu Chen's eyes flashed with a bone-piercing cold light. He sneered. I've given him a chance. If that old guy really comes back, then I'll take his little life. The sonorous and powerful voice contains confidence. Z is very powerful. Dustless also has 100% certainty to take him down. No one can pose much threat to him. But then again, Doflamingo's next goal is the King of Dressrosa. With his forehead squeezed together, Dustless remembered that Doflamingo has become a Shichibukai. I am afraid that his next plan is to seek the position of the King of Dressrosa. Caesar can also secretly create Pluto under his protection. Perfect and consolidate Dustless's ambition to unify the world. Chapter 573. Returning to the battleship, Z's face was twitching, the students were snoring and sleeping, there was saliva on the corners of their mouths, their expressions were rich and comfortable, obviously they were having a good dream. Who is that guy? Looking at the direction of Dustless's villa, Z's heart was mixed. He knew that this was Dustless' intention to let him go. Z was also prepared to die in battle, but he didn't expect Dustless to play this kind of trick. No matter from any point of view, this is an unsolvable dead end. After thinking about it for a while, Z no longer entangled himself. There was a saying that it was better to live than to die. Since he knew that Wu Chen intended to let him go, it was impossible for him to foolishly go back to die. After resting for about half a day, Z chose to leave Mariehua. These remaining students were really tired and needed to be given time to relax. Looking around, Z's current students, many of them will become the future mainstays, such as Smoker, who has outstanding strength, they are all here. Above the tall building, looking down at the battleship far away, even if it has become a tiny black dot, Dustless can see it clearly under his eyes. For him, distance is just a concept. Separated from each other by the ends of the earth, it is also insignificant. It seems that you are not a reckless man. Retracting his gaze, Dustless walked into the room with light steps. A huge narrow map came into view, and it was densely covered with red and white flags. White represents the Navy, while red represents the pirates. The whole map is almost occupied by the red pirate flag, everywhere in the four seas, as well as the New World. The power is far larger than Marine. It is a behemoth that can crush Marine. With such a big disadvantage, the Marines should have been strangled. The actual reason why they were able to survive until now was because the pirates were in a state of disunity. Otherwise, if all their forces were concentrated, the Marines would have been wiped out forever. In the future, the Yonko, Four Emperors, Whitebeard pirates almost destroyed the Marine headquarters. The power of all the pirates in the world can be imagined. How to lead one's own forces to survive was indeed a question worthy of consideration. Although Dustless's current strength could be said to be invincible, nothing was absolute. There was absolutely nothing wrong with taking a long-term view. The next step should be to obtain Dressrosa, to help that old brat Doflamingo ascend the throne. His gaze fell on the narrow island of Dressrosa. Dustless's eyes, which were usually calm, were filled with the flames of ambition. The weak are prey to the strong. Since you can't keep up with the times, you can only bid farewell to this world. Royal family of Luke. Living a comfortable life would only cause creatures to stop evolving and lose the will to forge ahead. Dressrosa was like that now. Chapter 574. Doflamingo's choice has nothing to do with Dustless. The former is more anxious than him, and human life is equivalent to grass for a pirate like Doflamingo who kills people like flax. According to Dustless's speculation, Doflamingo can't wait to implement this ruthless plan, which is comparable to his ambition to swallow the sky and devour the earth. The death of a few human lives is insignificant. It's just a small matter. Dustless is still interested in setting his future plans. If he wants to get a share of the pie in the future world, he must have a perfect plan for rainy days. The opportunity will not come again, and it is often left to those who are prepared in advance. Dustless's plan is also quite simple: suppress the enemy and strengthen himself. Both the Akagami, red hair, pirates and the Kaido pirates have been weakened by him in various ways. Compared with the miserable Akagami, red hair pirates who were almost killed, the Kaido pirates are much stronger. Although they were also extremely tragic by Dustless, they are much better than Akagami, red hair, Shanks who withdrew from the New World. Next is the Bigumam pirates and the Whitebeard pirates. The world is so big that the four seas are still okay. In the second half of the New World, most of it is occupied by the Yonko, four emperors. If you want to grab food from the tiger's mouth, you can only pull the teeth from the tiger's mouth. However, this is tantamount to self-destruction for most pirates. The power of the Yonko, four emperors, is beyond imagination. Dustless, Sama, what you want is here. White Zetsu emerged from the ground, holding a delicate iron box in his hands, quietly buckling the lid and baking it with an extremely strong iron lock, looking quite mysterious. In order to provoke the Whitebeard pirates and the Bigumam pirates, Dustless spent a lot of money. Isn't it a pity to give this thing to that old witch by Gumamu? No matter what, it's still the strongest and most evil dark fruit of the Logia. The dark fruit in this iron box is Logia's dark fruit, known as the most evil fruit in history. Its ability is terrible and it can form a black hole like gravity that swallows everything. How could White Zetsu be willing to give away such a powerful devil fruit to Bigumam, that old witch? It took him nearly a year to find this devil fruit with countless doppelgangers. Bigumam, that old witch, is ashamed. Why don't you give it to Miss? I think it will be of great use to her. Staring at Dustless, White Zetsu suggested tentatively. The matter of giving birth to a daughter was said by Dustless himself. There was a flash of hesitation in his eyes, and then he shook his head decisively. This plan is not feasible. It's still too early for that little girl to use the devil fruit. Let her waste it. Moon twos. What's more, if he secretly fed the dark fruit to Yushi, Dustless would guarantee that Kagaya would hunt him down all over the world. Secondly, using the devil fruit was equivalent to having an additional weakness. He would become a non-swimmer and unable to step into the sea. And this weakness is well known to the world. At first, Dustless also had the idea of dark fruit, but he had the system's bug's existence and didn't care about the gains and losses of a devil fruit. But giving the dark fruit to the Bigumam pirates will cause the power of their pirates to expand rapidly. White Zetsu murmured. He has also heard of the dark fruit's heaven-defyings. It is far more heaven-defying than ordinary Logia's ability. It doesn't matter, as long as you can provoke Bigumam and Whitebeard to fight, a devil fruit is insignificant. Dustless said quite casually, White Zetsu's problem is not a problem. Even if the dark fruit is eaten, it is not a big problem, as long as the other party is killed. At that time, the dark fruit will reappear again. With White Zetsu's huge clone, it is only a matter of time to find it. Whitebeard is very cunning. That guy should not rashly fight with Bigumam for a devil fruit. White Zetsu said with a little doubt. Even if the Yonko, four emperors, have grievances, they will maintain great restraint. Once the fight starts, the Marines who are watching the fire from the other side of the river and other ambitious pirates who covet the position of Yonko, four emperors. Ants can bite an elephant to death, and the power of countless ants can also collapse a river dam. It is not difficult to tear apart the tired Yonko, four emperors. Whitebeard will not be his opponent, but Blackbeard is anxiously waiting. Dustless smiled calmly when he heard this. Whitebeard will not do it, but Blackbeard, a man with ambition who can swallow the four seas, will not give up. His purpose of hiding the Whitebeard pirates for so many years is to get this most evil fruit in history. If the two overlords don't do anything, their pirates will fight. At that time, they will naturally jump from behind the scenes to the front. Dustless is the master of protecting his children, and Bigumam also can't rub sand in his eyes. The two of them are naturally dry wood and fire. They don't need Dustless to fan the flames to fight. Reluctantly handing the dark fruit to Dustless, White Zetsu also understands that he can't catch the wolf without sacrificing the child. If he wants to hook a scheming man like Blackbeard, only the dark fruit can attract his appetite. Today, Blackbeard is also extremely powerful. The 3 scars on red hair Shank's eyes were his masterpiece, and he himself had a few teeth knocked out. No matter what, it's still mine in the end. With a blazing heat in his hand, Dustless easily melted the iron box, revealing a strange purple fruit full of patterns. The surface gives people a feeling of extreme evil. A coldness that pierces the depths of the soul spreads from it. When the host of the fruit was killed, the ability would not disappear. Instead, it would appear in a different form. From the beginning to the end, this devil fruit would not escape the control of Dustless. Even if it was eaten by Whitebeard in the future, he could just kill him. Chapter 575. Wanting to get something without paying is tantamount to a fool's dream. The risk of this rash action is great and the harvest is extremely optimistic. Once the remaining 2 Yonko, 4 emperors, fight, the situation of the whole world will inevitably be affected. Dustless can also take advantage of this situation and implement his plan. No matter who gets the dark fruit in the end, it doesn't matter. Find an opportunity to give it to the crew of the Big Umam pirates, and then announce the news to the world. Dustless's eyes flashed with a cold light, and he sneered with killing intent. Then announce the news to the world and push Big Umam and her pirates to the forefront. The corners of Wu Chen's mouth curled up in a playful smile as he gloated. It doesn't matter whether it can attract others or not. In short, Blackbeard, the cat that smells blood, will never watch the ultimate devil fruit that he has been pursuing for a lifetime fall into the hands of Big Umam. It's a pity. I heard that this dark fruit can devour other abilities. Taking the dark fruit handed over by Dustless, White Zetsu said regretfully, and his tone was full of melancholy. Big Umam's brain may be damaged by anger. The only thing that can devour other abilities and occupy the other's ability for its own use is the dark fruit. Devouring the enemy's ability, this is also a rule that varies from person to person. Even if Big Umam really eats the dark fruit, she can't occupy the ability of others. With his eyes shining, Dustless murmured with interest, Blackbeard can swallow other people's abilities. The biggest factor is that his body structure is alien. It is precisely because Blackbeard's body is different from ordinary people that he can accommodate other abilities. If it was someone else, they may not be able to do this. Perhaps Blackbeard knows that his body structure is special, so he happily spends his life pursuing the dark fruit. In short, as long as this news is spread, we can watch from the sidelines. Even if Blackbeard is reluctant, he must be hostile to Big Umam. This is an open conspiracy, and it's not up to him to choose. Blackbeard, who is almost obsessed with the dark fruit, even if he knows that Dustless is behind the scenes, he has to step into this trap. What can he do if he knows that this is a conspiracy? He had no choice but to crawl inside obediently. This was the highest level of crafty schemes and machinations. 5 days later on an island in the New World, White Zetsu carried out the steps in Dustless's plan step by step, allowing the crew of the Big Umam pirates to, accidentally, encounter the evilest devil fruit in the world, dark fruit. It has to be said that the marine is depraved, but compared to the ugly pirates, the plot is much more noble. At least they won't do such a crazy thing as killing their companions. After accidentally discovering the devil fruit, the first thing these loyal subordinates of Big Umam thought of was not to tell Big Umam about the boss. Instead, several crew members with evil intentions silenced their companions. He intended to take the devil fruit for himself. It is reasonable to have evil intentions. The devil fruit illustration handbook recorded that this dark fruit is the evilest fruit in history. How can such an introduction be an ordinary thing? This sudden change was also beyond Dustless's expectations. Although this was the case, it was also what he wanted. Because of this, it was more confirmed that this was the dark fruit, so that some people with ulterior motives would think that this was hearsay. Because of the uneven distribution of the loot, it caused the crew to kill each other. This kind of thing happened everywhere. The episode of killing between the crew added a lot of suspense. The devil fruit that can cause the crew of the Yonko, 4 emperors, to kill each other must not be ordinary. This also confirmed the identity of the dark fruit. Secretly, Dustless used the huge privileges of the Tenryubito to add fuel to the fire. In just less than a day, This news that should have been limited to the Bigumam pirates swept across the New World like a hurricane. Enough to destroy the New World, the strongest dark fruit in the world appeared in the Bigumam pirates, and it was accompanied by several undeniable photos. Such shocking news appeared in newspapers all over the world the next day, and it became known to the world at an incredible speed. Among them, the most shocked was Bigumam, one of the Yonko 4 emperors. To be honest, it was just a devil fruit. Although it was powerful beyond imagination, Bigumam didn't care much because she was already an ability user, and the devil fruit was useless. What made it most difficult for her to accept was that the people who killed the crew were the few people she trusted the most, and they secretly did such a dirty thing behind her back. It was unforgivable. Those who tried to take the dark fruit were melted by her inhumane use of gastric juice. Bigumam also knew the temptation of the dark fruit. It was definitely not worse than Whitebeard's tremor fruit, Gura no Mi. However, the name of the Bigumam pirates was enough to stop those pirates. Although there were some who came to ask for the dark fruit, it was best to be mercilessly dismembered. Bastard of all people, why did you have to go to that old hag? The night sky was particularly quiet, and the tall Blackbeard roared angrily. His eyes were fixed on the devil fruit on the screen. He could be 100% sure that this was the legendary dark fruit. Thinking of Bai Gu Ma Mu's terrifying strength, Blackbeard broke out in a cold sweat. His heart was filled with fear. Unlike the heroic great pirates, Blackbeard had a huge disadvantage, or it could be said that his character was flawed. Whether it was 100 Beast Kaido, red-haired Shanks, or Whitebeard, they all turned a deaf ear to life in the battle and held the mentality of fighting with their lives. Only Blackbeard was afraid of death. Of course, this is also human nature. It shows that compared to other pirates, Blackbeard is more cunning and realistic. He considers his life in everything. If his life is gone, what's the use of getting the dark fruit? The cautious Blackbeard naturally wouldn't be an idiot to fight Bigumam alone. Chapter 576. Inside Mariehua's villa. White Zetsu performs his daily fixed duties and informs Dustless of all the important information collected, and Dustless uses the unparalleled power of Tenryubito to spread the news of the dark fruit, and the whole world is shrouded in a giant vortex. The bottomless invisible vortex is spreading, attracting the eyes of the major forces. Although the ability of the fruit varies from person to person, if you find a good seedling and cultivate it a little and give it to them, it will be a powerful battle power in the future, and it can even reach the level of an admiral. It is self-evident what it means for a pirate group to have a super battle power comparable to an admiral. Big Mom is also a smart person. These days, he is looking for the right candidate, but he suddenly realized that there seems to be no such person in his huge pirate group. How many people are worthy of trust if the person she once trusted can steal the dark fruit without her knowing? Maybe many people have already planned how to take the head of her captain. There were as many talented people as there were carps crossing the river. Whether or not they were completely loyal was a big question mark. Such a serious question had to be handled carefully. Otherwise, if they nurtured an ingrate, the gains would not make up for the losses. Blackbeard has been staying in the Whitebeard pirates with peace of mind, and there is no big movement. White Zetsu whispered, and he couldn't help but look at Blackbeard. Blackbeard is much calmer than he imagined, and he can maintain a clear mind in the face of fatal temptation. Blackbeard knows that the more urgent the matter is, the more important it is to have a calm heart, so he is currently as calm as a stone, but silently chooses to observe the movement. Bai Gu Ma Mu was not a gentle sheep. Anyone who dared to touch a tiger's butt would end up being torn into pieces. Don't underestimate Blackbeard. There will always be a time when a wild beast shows its fangs. His ambition is not to settle things peacefully. He is only waiting for the perfect opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. Dustless said softly. His indifferent tone was filled with certainty. The value of the dark fruit is equivalent to Blackbeard's second life. How can he give up his second life if he is afraid of death? The most cunning creatures in the world are humans, and the most treacherous among humans are those who have abandoned their dignity. Dustless said calmly. His words flowed like a river and were filled with absolute wisdom. To them, victory, defeat, glory, and personal dignity can all be laughed away. And Blackbeard is precisely such a person. Needless to say, Blackbeard did not care about personal glory. To him, fame and fortune were just fleeting clouds. He was powerful and had once seriously injured Red Hair. The 3 scars on Red Hare's eyes were all thanks to Blackbeard. It was the complete opposite of his usual introverted aura. Blackbeard narrowed his eyes. He was as cunning as a rat. The gaze that shot out from the slits of his eyes was exceptionally vicious. It was as if he was choosing to devour someone. His cold lips were raised high. Even though he concealed his smile very well, one could still see the curve of his lips. After a night, he had already thought of countermeasures to deal with it. It is definitely not possible to fight alone. He can only fool the Whitebeard pirates to fight together. Whitebeard is very rational and smart, but it does not mean that the IQ of his crew is unfathomable. Chapter 577. Ha ha ha. Blackbeard's face was full of fanaticism, and his longing eyes had already seen the scene of him stepping on Whitebeard's body to become the supreme hegemon. Gritting his teeth, he was filled with boundless hope for the future. After enduring patiently for several decades, he might be able to prove his Tao and become a god in a few days. From then on, he would step onto the path of light. Why are you laughing so early in the morning, idiot Titch? My dream of becoming the Pirate King was ruined by you, Titch. Don't mind him. He always has this kind of silly moment. The awakened Whitebeard pirates complained with dissatisfaction, their eyes full of grief, but even so, they only protested verbally, and this scene was not surprising. Everyone thinks that Titch is a trustworthy person. Subconsciously, they have regarded him as a brother. I'm sorry. You know, I'm extremely optimistic. Sometimes my body can't help but vent its excitement. Scratching his head awkwardly, Blackbeard put on an honest look. Although it looked neither fish nor fowl, no one doubted him. The Whitebeard pirates were also speechless. They all thought that Blackbeard was showing his true feelings. A group of idiots. On the surface, he was smiling, but in his heart, he was cursing the group of idiots in front of him. After following Whitebeard for a long time, they had also developed a heroic spirit. Their hearts were as broad as the vast sea. However, for a cunning pirate, this is not a good sign. If you want to survive in this chaotic world, you can't be careless with anyone. Even your companions are no exception. No one knows what's in the other's mind, so it's better to be careful. Regardless of this group of people, he looked at the person washing on the bow deck. It was Thatch, the captain of the 4th Division, and he was also a good friend of Blackbeard. Of course, he has a good relationship with Thatch. This is the reason why Blackbeard deliberately pulled him into the relationship. Thatch is approachable, and he is much more naive than the suspicious Captain Mark and the Diamond Jozu. It also shows that he is much easier to deceive. Pull him into the water. Whitebeard can't ignore it. It's better to let Thatch get hurt. This will inevitably arouse Whitebeard's anger, and he will desperately fight with Bigu's mom. Blackbeard was very proud. After observing Whitebeard for nearly 10 years, he had figured out Whitebeard and the temperament of this group of crew members. What drew these crew members from all over the world and with different skin colors together was Whitebeard's broad mind and the sincere feelings between them. Once the crew members are bullied and wronged, the entire Whitebeard pirates will attack them. Captain Thatch, it's not good. My father is in danger. Realizing that there was no one around, Blackbeard squeezed out tears from the corners of his eyes and ran to Surd's side. Strange. He turned his head around strangely, his eyes emitting a dim light. Combined with his rough and ferocious face, he looked particularly frightening. His eyes stared at the dense forest on the island. He suddenly felt a pair of eyes spying on him. Bigumam is terrible, but there are some evil people who are not afraid of death, and then they provoke the Bigumam pirates 3 times in a row, trying to get the favor of the goddess of luck. Of course, they still received the grim smile of the Grim Reaper in the end. This group of people is the main force of this battle. In the dark ice cellar, there were coffins placed neatly, which was used by Dustless to store the corpses, including the corpses of the previous Hokage. They were responsible for the main combat mission this time. Summoning Jutsu, Edo Tensei. As Dustless shouted, the unmoving coffin on the ground suddenly lifted up. Then, the entire surface of the coffin burst open, revealing a few familiar cold faces. Then, after a few seconds, they all opened their eyes. Whiz! whiz, whiz. Several sharp sounds broke through the air in succession. In the darkness where you couldn't see your own fingers, you could vaguely see a few hazy black shadows pouncing on Wu Chen from all directions. Their hands were shining with cold light, and they were obviously holding sharp weapons. As expected, keeping your consciousness was the wrong choice. Although a pure killing machine is cruel, it is very suitable for old antiques like you. His left eye suddenly turned into Rinnegan, and the calm corner of his clothes was blown up, followed by an invisible repulsive force that was unstoppable. Shinra Tensei! Bang bang bang! Several shadows were forced back in the blink of an eye, and their bodies were ruthlessly scattered. Their faces came into view. They were the previous Hokage led by Hashirama. Even with the immortal body, it is easy to kill you. You don't want to die again. Dustless's eyes were as calm as stagnant water, and he looked indifferently at the people who were knocked down. His emotionless expression and cold voice coincided with the cold killing machine. Humph. Have you ever seen a Hokage compromise with the enemy? Uchiha Dustless. An old but full of energy roared. It was the Sandaime Hokage who was glaring at them. The other Hokages were silent. Their eyes were cold as they stared at Wu Chen, silently expressing their position. In that case, I can only deprive you of your consciousness. Although your combat power will decrease, it doesn't matter. The immortal body is enough to make up for the decrease in strength. With a strange smile, the originally expressive faces of the Hokage instantly became pale and indifferent, and their eyes were replaced by emptiness. In an instant, Dustless brutally deprived them of their consciousness. Originally, for the sake of Tsunade's face, I could reluctantly let you go once and keep your own consciousness. You don't know what's good for you, so you can only blame yourself for this. Dustless glanced at them indifferently. These so-called Hokage are still stubborn, and now things have changed, and time and space have changed, and the deep-rooted ideas in their hearts seem to be affecting their reason. There was no market for the will of fire in the past. Now in this world, there was similarly no market. But to Dustless, these few superpower houses were all divine weapons used to kill in the dark. It doesn't matter if their strength decreases, the immortal body is enough to make up for the deficiency. In this world, no one knows the truth-seeking ball. Chapter 579. Pursing his lips, Wu Chen was disdainful of these old fogies in front of him. They were always talking about unity and guarding the future, but they have always been singing a one-man show. In the past, no one cared about them. The situation in this world is more complicated and changeable. Their saintly mentality will only make them a laughingstock. Ninjas are very ugly, but they are slightly inferior to pirates. Pirates have no morality. One second they can call each other brothers, and the next second they can fight against each other. Time passed quickly, and 7 days passed in a blink of an eye. Because of Dustless's interference, the whole world was full of gunpowder, so almost all the pirates stared at the movements of the Bigu Mamu pirates and became the target of public criticism in an instant. During this period, it is worth mentioning that Thatch, the captain of the 4th Division under Whitebeard, came to secretly steal the dark fruit. He was easily defeated by Bigu Mamu and tore off an arm of the other party. Even Blackbeard was beaten to a pulp. Whitebeard knew that he went berserk on the spot and led the entire Whitebeard pirates to invade. He fought with the Bigu Mamu pirates for a day and gained the upper hand. Now Whitebeard is only in his 60s. Although his body has begun to decline, he is still in the golden age of his peak and can be said to be invincible. As one of the Yonko, 4 emperors, Bigu Mamu is obviously inferior to Whitebeard. Using the powerful ability of Tremor Fruit, Gura Gura no Mi, and showing the power to destroy the world, he easily destroyed the island where Bigu Mamu was entrenched and temporarily repelled the Bigu Mamu pirates. Damn, someone must have plotted against me. Damn dark fruit. Countless blood vessels spread in her eyes, and Bigu Mamu roared angrily, venting her inner depression and indignation. Looking at her, her body was not inferior to the giant clan. Her body was covered with blood, and even some parts had traces of depression. These were all thanks to Whitebeard. This is too strange. It must be some bastard who plotted against me. If I don't break your bones and scatter your ashes, I can't vent the hatred in my heart. Bigu Mamu gasped and roared in a low voice, no different from a hysterical beast. At first, Big Mama didn't think much of it, but later, as more and more pirates challenged her, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. The Big Umam pirates are powerful enough to destroy the world, but if they are targeted by the whole world, they will die. It is obvious that someone is plotting against her and she has become the target of the whole world. Bang! He angrily threw the metal box containing the dark fruit away, and a dent was formed on the deck of the battleship. As if he was still angry, he stomped on it a few times. Bai Guma Mu's heart felt stifled. Chapter 580. Boom boom boom. Monstrous waves were set off around the fleet, and the seawater of more than 10 meters almost swallowed the Big Umam pirates. The seawater had wet Big Umam's bulky coat. Nevertheless, her forehead was sweating uncontrollably. For the first time in her life, she showed a fearful expression. Now she was already bruised, and Garp was enough for her to drink a pot. If Dustless was added. Thinking about it, Big Umam couldn't help but feel a chill, and her body uncontrollably retreated. Big bandits like Bigu's mom were not afraid of death, but if the enemy was an invincible existence, then they would be an idiot to recklessly face it head-on. Of the 36 stratagems, escape is the best stratagem, which is vividly reflected in the hands of pirates. Although her teeth were itching with anger, Big Umam had to admit that going against the current would only lead to her own destruction, and she had to escape. This is the way to survive. Where there is life there is hope. Let's wait and see. Through the sight of the telescope, she glanced fiercely at the Marines, and with the most vicious language in her life, she did not hesitate to curse the attacking Marines. Well, what's with that guy's eyes? Her eyes suddenly fell on Dustless, and Big Umam was surprised. Dustless seemed to be aware of Big Umam's spying, and he raised the corners of his mouth, with a bright smile. He looked quite approachable, and his smile was like a warm spring breeze in March, which was refreshing. However, Big Umam's eyes were full of different meanings. Contempt, ridicule. In short, Big Umam's eyes were laughing at her powerlessness. Dustless's light and elegant smile was the embodiment of her powerlessness. It was precisely because she couldn't threaten Wu Chen with her strength that the latter had such a relaxed expression. He was quietly contemptuous and didn't need any words to modify it. The calmer Dustless was, the more it was an insult to Big Umam, a naked contempt. In the dark, Big Umam saw Dustless's unscrupulous ridicule, and her eyes were about to burst. Mom, you! The crew members looked at Bai Guma in fear. In a trance, they even saw the miserable appearance of Bai Guma, and subconsciously took a step back. Big Umam pirates, Captain Charlotte Lingling, bounty of one of the Yonko 4 emperors. In the second half of the New World, the crew called her mother, when she was young. Dustless looked at the information about Bigu's mom in his hand. It was all sent by the Navy. It was just simple basic information. For Dustless, as an honorary admiral, it was just a small matter. Dustless had a strange expression on his face when he saw the word, mother. Hee. It seems like you have the same idea as this old man. Seeing Dustless's strange expression, Garp's face was full of wretchedness, and his strange laughter made people speechless and tangled. He patted Dustless's shoulder quite familiarly, and then leaned close to Dustless's ear. When he looked around and no one was around, Garp's face changed into a gossipy expression. Whitebeard's crew called him father, and Big Umam's crew called him mother. Both of them belong to the giant clan, and they are also one of the Yonko 4 emperors. Do you think they hooked up with each other when they were young? Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Garp asked with a smirk on his face. Occasionally, his eyes would sparkle in agreement. Isn't there a saying that goes, if you are fated to meet each other, even if you are 1,000 miles away? They must have something going on between them. They are a perfect match. Dustless's forehead was filled with countless black lines, and the corner of his mouth was twitching. He stared at Garp with both anger and amusement. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't refute it. Although he knew that this was Garp's nonsense, it was indeed a coincidence that made people speechless. That old man might still be. Seeing that Garp was still talking nonsense, Dustless simply turned around and left. The navy cloak behind him was also bulging. He was quite uncomfortable with this outfit. Although uncomfortable, he still chose to do as the Romans do. He always felt that in the name of justice, doing shady business was more suitable for him. Where is the next sailing route? Big's mom is already a drowning dog. Dustless stopped and looked straight at Garp. He was an honorary admiral and had no power. Of course, he was too lazy to take care of it. Everything fell on Garp's head. There is no need to pursue Yonko, 4 emperors. The desperate beast is more ferocious than usual. If you can defeat her, you can just take back the islands occupied by her. Garp said in a depressed whisper. Looking at the back of Bigu's mom, he clenched his fists. Even if he was unwilling, he couldn't help it. A skinny camel is bigger than a horse. What's more, there are white-beard pirates around. If they suddenly burst out and take a bite, the consequences would be unimaginable. Especially after the previous fight with the white-beard pirates, the Bigu's mom pirates were greatly damaged. At least in the next few years, she won't be able to make waves again. Do as you wish. Glancing faintly, Dustless knew that there was a deeper meaning. In addition, there is also the biggest factor. After destroying a Yonko, 4 emperors, not only will there be no benefits, but bad things will come out one after another. The islands ruled by Bigu's mom will first suffer, and pirates will begin to fight for territory and kill each other. The balance of the 3 major forces will also be broken, and the whole world will fall into a state of rage and loss of control. This old man said a lot. It's estimated that he doesn't have the confidence to kill Bigu's mom. This is interesting. Looking at the faintly unwilling Vice Admiral Garp, Dustless smiled, and at the same time, he was a little curious about Bigu's mom. There is no doubt that Yonko, 4 emperors, are peerless powerhouses. Although Garp is strong enough, the other party is the elite of the entire Bigu's mom pirates. Maybe Roger, the Pirate King, will be defeated. Chapter 581. The black ink spots in the distance gradually disappeared and disappeared from the sea forever. The encounter with the Bigu Mam pirates was just a small interlude in the middle. On the island once occupied by the Yonko 4 emperors, the island affiliated with Bigu Mam, countless coffins rose from the ground, and the dead walked out with dull eyes and a smell of decay. These people were given life again, flexibly manipulating their limbs, slaughtering the remaining pirates on the island, and those never-before-seen ninjutsu were overwhelming. Water attribute, fire attribute, earth attribute. All kinds of stunning moves appeared on the stage. Killing and arson in the name of justice is much more interesting than leisurely mariehua, doing nothing all day. With a strange smile on his cheeks, Dustless disappeared in an instant and turned into a golden beam of light, directly locking the pirates in front of him. Light speed kick. Boom boom boom. The moment the voice fell, the locked black shadow was hit by the golden light, and the super-large building in the distance disappeared together with it, turning into a pile of rubble. Even the trace of the corpse was not left. At the moment of the explosion, it had been annihilated into nothingness. What kind of ability does this guy have? It's almost the same as Kizaru's fruit. After killing the attacking pirate, Garp's eyes fell on Dustless's calf with photon remnants. The moves and abilities used were almost the same. Even so, Garp didn't doubt that it was the same fruit. It was impossible for this to happen, it was just a division of similar abilities. In the same era, devil fruit with the same ability does not exist, this is known to the world. The whole scene was bloody and violent, there were charred limbs and broken arms everywhere, the ground was burned black by some kind of blazing force, and the screams were endless. Compared with the cold and ruthless Dustless, Garp was a person with a conscience. Those who could be captured alive were all captured alive, and those who dared to resist were just knocked out. On the other hand, Dustless's Kusanagi cloud sword, condensed from photons cut iron like mud, and the pirates who were cut were all brutally dismembered. Executioners who commit crimes in the name of justice, stop immediately. An enraged voice came from behind, containing a monstrous killing intent that wished to tear Dustless to shreds. One could even hear the ear-piercing sound of teeth grinding due to excessive hatred. The pirates' brains don't seem to be very bright. They might be able to escape if they hide. Jumping out like a clown, do they think they are the saviors of the world? Sensationalism. Without even turning his head, Dustless's mocking voice resounded in the boundless void. Then, he disappeared from where he stood. Damn it, where did you go? The sound of astonishment exploded, and the pupils were full of dullness. The figure in front of them suddenly disappeared like a ghost, and the observation hockey couldn't perceive the location. It was hard not to be surprised. Boom, boom, boom. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back as an unprecedented power fell from the sky. His standing body was instantly crushed by this valiant and unparalleled power. The ground sank like a swamp as he was mercilessly trampled into the ground in an instant. Ka ka ka. The corner of his mouth vomited blood uncontrollably, and then he struggled desperately, but the small foot on his back was no different from a mountain weighing dozens of tons. No matter how fierce the resistance was, it couldn't splash a ripple, and no matter how powerful the force was, it couldn't shake the tender calf. Along with his dignity, it was trampled to nothing. His body was like a willow fluttering in the wind. This was the only thing that touched his mind. A strange emotion spread from the bottom of his heart. In an instant, he felt like a tiny grain of sand. No one would care if he died or not. In this way, do you still think you can save the world? Do you realize how fragile and powerless you are? Spitting out an indifferent accent that did not belong to a human, Wu Chen's emotionless gaze was like looking down at a powerless insect. His cold pupils splashed with faint ripples. Has the mastery of armament hockey reached a small achievement? You have some skills. The texture under his feet was no different from falling on steel, and there was an essential difference between it and the flexible back of human beings. Looking closely, Dustless suddenly felt that the struggling side of the face was familiar, and he seemed to have seen it before. Captain Thatch, we're coming to save you. Suddenly, there was a slight tremor on the ground. When he looked up, the scene reflected in his pupils was a dense group of pirates. They were holding all kinds of weapons, and they were charging towards him with a majestic momentum. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at the dusty face. Perhaps because his left arm was broken, he didn't recognize Thatch's identity for a while. It turned out to be the Whitebeard Pirates' 4th Division Captain, Thatch. No wonder you have this confidence. At this moment, Thatch was in a mess. His left arm had been torn, his eyes were full of filth, and even though his face was full of dust, it still couldn't hide his pale face. Since you are here, Marshal D. Titch, nicknamed Blackbeard, may also be on this island. With a cold face, Dustless looked straight at the pirates roaring in front of him. His pupils flashed with a rare pity, and the Kusanagi sword condensed from photons in his hand instantly collapsed. Ignorance is fearless, it's used to describe your group. The white jade-like hand condensed a large number of photons, like a bottomless black hole, frantically swallowing and absorbing the photons around, condensing into a dazzling flash. Yasukani no Magatama. Thousands of golden flashes flashed out, and the gorgeous light played a cruel scene. Dozens of pirates attacked, their bodies had hundreds of burn holes out of thin air, and they fell to the ground with an unwilling face. Although they were already dead, their gray pupils were full of fear. Unlike Garp, Dustless only pursued two policies when dealing with enemies. The first was to completely control them, and the second was to completely destroy them. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.